Hey, this is Tracy Lewis with Stuff and Things. I am today working on my swaps. This was one of my designs. There's going to be a dozen of these. They will all be finished as this is. 4 of the swaps I'm making are finished, and 2 of them are what's called a shoebox swap, or like a make and take. Only you do them all together and you swap around the boxes till you've made, I think it's in groups of 12. So I have to make a dozen of those for 2 different groups. So I wanted to discuss the card as a walkthrough, and then I'm going to do some quick stamping and coloring. The way I made this card was from scratch, and I cut these pieces out by hand. The embossing folder and the die cut folder, or die cut, that comes with this particular set, which is Friends Are Like Seashells, helps do some of the work, but not all of the work. So I'll discuss how I'm going to do the rest of the work. I'm not the best fussy cutter, though my hands and I have had some surgeries over the years for them to help them in their life, since I've given them such a hard life, so they are way better than they were. But I do have a tool called a Brother. It is a cutting machine, and I do plan to pass these through the cutter to allow me to not have to do the fussy cutting. So there is a particular way I will be prepping these, knowing how the cutter works. So the background strip is from a set that comes with a whole bunch of wood in it, called In Good Taste. I've got 3 pieces sitting out here. I do plan on varying a little bit the materials, so they aren't going to be identical. So these are the 3 different color tones. The one that's on there now is this dark color, and I will be cutting these into strips and will be distressing them. I distressed the edges. I even folded this particular edge, made a little tear, so that'll all vary. And then I crinkled it up, and then I flattened it back out and popped it up on dimensionals. It is a little bit wider than the silver webbing, which was how I decided the width of my strip. The idea of this silver webbing is to give the surface a wet appearance, so like it's wet driftwood, and I think that goes very nicely. I haven't added any embellishments yet to it. I suspect I'm going to end up coloring dots, maybe silver. There's the silver and gold metallic, and then I might take some blues. I have the Misty Moonlight blends as well as the Night of Navy blends, so I'm going to be finishing that part off. But right now I am working on coloring 11 more of these 4 different shells. So the way I've done the shells, each is its own color. I did not use black, so for the blue I used Night of Navy. For this Calypso Coral I used Cajun Craze. I used Early Espresso for the sand dollar to bring out the pattern in the sand dollar, though in real life this pattern is very muted, and so I might even play with swapping. This one uses the crumb cake ink. No, actually I ended up not liking the crumb cake, and I used Early Espresso stamped off. And what I have, the piece, this is Early Espresso natural. So what I'm gonna do is stamp this sand dollar in the crumb cake, and I might flip these and use the Early Espresso on this little ridged scalloped clamshell. And the green back here is kelp, and it is a part of the die cut next to the blue shell. I actually cut the blue shell and this kelp from a half piece of basic white, 2 3/4 by 4 1/4 wide. This little clamshell you can shape from this piece right here, and then I had to trim out each of the shells. This particular shell, oh no, there's the clamshell. Each of the 2 pieces that do get what's called a 3D embossing, which I will show you in a second, have a little bit of white around them, and I had to trim all of the white off. And the starfish and the sand dollar, I had to cut, fussy cut, and those are what I will be putting on the brother. So this is a wonderful embossing folder that gives the blue shell its 3D appearance that it might not show as much on the camera as it does in real life. It actually, you can feel it, it's bumpy, and it has a raised surface. And this this little clamshell is new, and it does not have the texture. Though I do have, originally I did it in blue, and it was suggested that I change this to yet a different color. And I can feel the ridges, so it also will be ridged when it's finished. So, the first thing I want to do, and I'll go ahead and do this with you guys, is stamp a sand dollar. Let's see if I have big enough to, yep, I can do it by hand, because this first one I will not bother with cutting. So I'm still kind of in the late stages of planning for this particular project, and then I will get out the brother to do the cuts. I probably won't film that. I do have some old footage of me cutting, and I might go ahead and link to that so you guys can see how these cutters work. And mine is an old, it's like a CM350 or something, and that might be not exactly right, but that's close. So it's a few years old, and I bet you there's new ones that do even more fancy things. So my question is, with the sand dollar, that does look more like a sand dollar actually looks, and I need to have a very light muted color similar to this. So I have pulled from my Copic collection E41, and I also pulled Stampin' Up's Ivory, and I'm gonna go ahead and let you see the difference. See how dark that is? But when you run this color right next to it, they are complementary colors. Like E41 is a lighter version of Ivory. So I think it will make a really good pair of colors to color this sand dollar. Sand dollars are actually like a really neutral, soft beige. So there doesn't have to be a lot of color on this. And these 3 circles are actually holes. So how I colored this one is I used gray, but I might just use a dark brown, the color of the driftwood behind it. I'm going to go back here and soften, do a little blending of the edges between these 2 colors. Again, this is the basic white, so it is it can handle some pretty good amount of color on it, even more so than the Whisper White could handle, which is nice. If any of this gets too dark, I have my color lifter that I can lighten up my tones, and actually in some of my coloring I added some dotting with the color lifter, and I'm actually adding some dots. The texture of a sand dollar is actually like a rough texture, so it has some pits in it and some pock marks. It is not a really smooth glossy shell, it's like a matte surface that does get some wear and tear on it, so that's why I'm adding the textures that you see. These are very common on the beaches in Washington State or in the Pacific Northwest area. Down in Oregon, I am not sure how common they are here on the East Coast. So that is Let me get, see if I have a dark enough. This is the light crumb cake. It might be too light, but that might be okay. I'll leave it like that for now so I can cut it out and place it over the top. Again, the way the Brother works these lines, the more solid and thick the lines, the easier the Brother has, the easier time it has to get the cut lines correct. It does not do well if you have open areas, and this is all closed. I use markers, the Stampin' Up markers in the various colors to actually close off if I have artwork that has some minor openings, like if it's sketchy. I will go in with the fine line side of the Mini Marvelous marker that is coordinating with the ink I stamped, and I will close off those lines to help my brother be able to do the work for me, and so I don't have to fussy cut. The other trick when preparing for using the Brother is that it works better on a full sheet of paper because it has this tacky masking backing. It's a sheet that is used, and it has register marks on it, so the Brother knows when to start and stop. Okay, so I have finished this, but I see a little bit of white around the edges, and how I remove the white around the edges and what I did to all of these is take my blend marker and color the edges so that there is no white left, because I want a nice crisp edge. I want these to look somewhat 3D and like the real thing, so I don't want any white. I'm just going to go ahead and sneak this one on top of the other. So that is what I'm going to go with. There's my setup, my colors. I have two different mats for this, and I am not sure if I'm going to vary them or not. It ends up that I am completely out of early espresso, and I have more coming, but here is what it looks like with espresso behind, which I think looks very nice. And I also really like it with the Misty Moonlight. So what I will do for these mats, if I'm going to do, say, 6 of each, is I will cut out using the stitched rectangle, the largest stitched rectangle, to take this piece out. So I will have a whole bunch of extra of the blue and the early espresso, which I believe if I do the 6, I'll only have 2 panels left. So I definitely don't want to just let myself get that low. And then, like I said, I'm going to be coloring some dots of some variety. Perhaps this particular version will have the Misty Moonlight, and then the early espresso I will color some brown. Alright, so the best way to prepare for the Brother, as I was saying, is 8.5 by 11 sheets are what you need to use. So I have an 8.5 by 11 sheet nearby. I'm going to go ahead and bring it over. I will stamp it up, and then I will start coloring. I will probably speed up the stamping, and we'll color one of each first, talking through how I'm going to color, and then I'll go away and color the rest of them offline. Alright, I am back. I am going to be doing the sand dollar and the starfish. It looks like me giving it a little border. There's only going to be 5 per row of this. I was also thinking, one more analysis here. So this is the color with the light sand dollar with the blue. Here's the color with the dark sand dollar. And then if I use the brown, I might want to use the dark sand dollar. I don't know, see what it looks like light. I think I like the darker a little bit better, but I know that is not a realistic representation of a sand dollar. I just like how crisp that looks. Alright, so tell me what you think. Should I go with the light or should I go with the dark? That is the question. Maybe I will mix them. So let's get the espresso. Alright, I have finished coloring one of each of the shells and thought I would do a quick review. I filmed as I colored, but I didn't talk too much. For the blues, I just follow the pixelated shading, starting with the dark Misty Moonlight, adding in some dark Night of Navy, and then dark balmy blue. You can see where I just picked this side to be the shadowed side and added the balmy blue, keeping that pretty simple and fast. Pardon my cough. The little clamshell here has been colored with E41, followed by ivory, and you can add a little bit of light crumb cake as well if you want. The starfish is light calypso coral. I have dark pumpkin pie, and then I pulled out the pale papaya, dark pale papaya. And I did some dotting. I left the middle lighter colored. In all of these cases, the shells and the starfish are pretty bumpy. The smoothest surface is the sand dollar. So I did the sand dollar 2 colors. The darks are the holes and will make more sense when I have the sand dollar on the dark or the wood strip. And then I also colored one of the espresso outlined ones. I know that these aren't a realistic coloration because sand dollars are very pale, but I just really like that sharp, clean look. So I did half of them in the crumb cake for a lighter color tone, and then the other half in the early espresso. So now I'm going to go back and color all the rest of these. I'm going to break out my Brother electronic fussy cutter, get these all cut, and I'll come back and do a reveal of all of the pieces after they're all done. I don't want to bore you to death with the coloring process of getting all these colored. So stay tuned. Alright, I have now prepared my cutting mat. The cutting mat is a sticky surface, tacky if that's a term they use, and the idea is that it's tacky enough to keep the paper from moving. So like if I try to move it here, it will not move because it's sticky, and when you peel up and put down paper over time, it gets little fibers and it makes the tacky less tacky. So you use a non-invasive cleansing wipe. You can't use like a Lysol cleansing wipe. So I buy the personal cleansing wipes with no scent at the dollar store. And I have done a cleaning of this mat because it hasn't been used in a while. And I will use the color setting. I did confirm it is a CM350. It is at least 3 years old. And I'm going to run it through. It will scan this image, and then from the scan that it creates, it will create cut marks. So I'm going to set down the camera. The Brother is not in a space where my camera can be overhead fixed, so I will try to film as I go, and then I also will put a link into a project. It was a Stampin' Up project I did long ago when I first got the Brother and had got it all figured out, so I will link that on my blog as well for extra information. And I believe that this will cut in within 5 minutes. We'll see. I haven't turned it on and used it in a long time, but this many cuts will take about 5 minutes, and it would take me probably an hour to 2 hours to cut all these out nicely. So we will see if the Brother is a more efficient solution for the fussy cutting that I need to do. Okay, I have inserted my cut mat. What it does, if I had a flatter surface, which would be better, this paper, the cardstock, would not have separated from the tacky. So there's a little trick I'm going to show you that I do. We'll see if this all works. Like I said, it has been a long time since I've used this tool. I am doing color recognition mode to create the cut data from images. It's going to scan first when I hit start. And here's my trick. I kind of run my hand along the paper to kind of re-adhere it. It's going to go all the way through and then all the way back. And then on the machine is the color image. The top row of sand dollars are very light, so it does still appear that they are all registered. We will see if that causes a problem or not. And I am now going to take these arrows and make the image smaller. Oh, Hub is here, so I'm probably going to have to turn this off so he gets settled. Alright, so I'm going to film for you guys what the it's going to do now to register the cut marks, and we'll see how it goes. I will probably fast forward through this part. perfect. Okay, now I'm going to choose that I only want it to do an outline. And let's take a look at how it has done. I told you I thought maybe the top sand dollars might be a problem, and that indeed is the only problem that I am seeing. So I am going to do a little more work on the 2 sand dollars. Everything else looks perfect. So I will be fixing those, but I can't remove them from the matter. I get to start all over. If I'm okay with starting over, I will just have to rescan the image. So of all the possibilities, this is a really good outcome. So I will be back to do this again once I have done a little more coloring on those top sand dollars. Alright, so I recolored a little bit more around the upper edges of the 2 sand dollars that weren't complete. Rescanned. You can see purple where it's showing I had clicked the outline only button. I will now save this. And then it's going to pop up with an estimate. I am going to save that to the machine, which I really didn't. I could have just done a direct cut instead of saving it to the machine. Now, since I saved it to the machine instead of doing a direct cut, you can. The reason why it's not necessary to save to the machine is that this is a unique art project. I will never make this exact art project. It will never look exactly like this again, even if I were to try to do it. I couldn't. And so there really was no need for me to save it. And so I'm going to now go to the memory. So I'm going to cancel. I'm going to back. It's going to say it's going to delete the information, and that's okay. And now I'm going to say that I'm going to go to the memory, and I'm going to set the phone down now to get it up and then show you how it estimates the time to cut. Okay, I went into the machine and I brought up this cut file. I'm going to say okay, and then I'm going to say okay, everything looks good. I don't need to add or change anything. And now I'm going to tell it I want it to cut. And oh, there we go. So I told you my estimate on this many images would be 5 to 7 minutes. It says it's going to be a 5-minute cut. I will need to watch it to make sure that the paper doesn't move. The reason why I had mentioned earlier that I don't use the A2 size cut down pieces is because they tend to not stick well enough. I have had the best success using a full 8.5 by 11 sheet. Even a 12 by 12 would work really well on this because it is a 12 by 12 mat. So I'm going to go ahead and tell it to start, and I am going to be kind of observing and making sure that I keep there's 2 different ways to cut. You can either cut it, it's kind of moving to its own pattern through the different images. You can have it go linear or have it make its own efficient path system. So this must be its own path that it has decided is the best to cut. I'm using the blade set at, it looks like a little under 5. The turquoise is the blade itself, and it pops out and you can adjust it as needed. You can't adjust it in place. I'm feeling the cuts are all done. The cuts I chose were the cuts that are with no white border on it, like my sample card was that I had shown you. It is keeping track of the time. It has 4 minutes left. At this point, I'm no longer really carefully monitoring the paper because I feel like if it was not well attached to the mat, it would have shifted already and I would have had to start over. If you do have a problem and you get a little bit of an errant cut, you can still use the same image. It doesn't ruin the whole thing. You just need to figure out why your paper shifted and make sure it doesn't shift again. That's kind of the biggest challenge. This particular mat has been very well used. You can actually see all these cut lines, probably from me having it a little bit too deep, but you do have to cut through the paper, so you will get cut lines on your mat, and eventually the mat will need to be replaced. I already have a second mat just like this, as well as a 12 by 24 mat, which is the largest size of image that you can cut. And you can cut all different materials on here. I have cut vinyl and paper. The mis-stamped shells are going to be cut, but they'll be cut funky because of their mis-stamping. But I made sure I stamped extras, so I'll still have as many as I need. And it's down to 2 minutes left. Alright, I'm going to let it finish. I'm going to go get my special tool to peel all the images off the mat, and I want to get that ready for when it's done. So I'll be right back. Alright, I am back. I have my special spatula tool. This is the tool that you push up all of the images that are now cut out. And we have less than a minute left. It even thinks there was a minute left, so it's finished cutting. And now I'm going to start with the bottom corner. And I see this little guy popped right out. He isn't perfect. I didn't check any further, but he lost one part of his tooth. I probably will still use it just like that. That doesn't bother me. That came out beautiful. So I'm not going to bore you with the taking all of these up. I will show you that the tool, the spoon tool, just really quickly lifts everything up. And then you can start popping your images apart. Oh, I can feel that one of the reasons why I don't want to go too fast is up here I feel that the images did not necessarily cut deep enough, which means from last time to this time I need to adjust my blade over here. The blade needs to be so you pop that up from down to up, pull it out. There's the numbers. Let's see if I can get them to focus. There we go. So I told you it was at under 5. It's actually just over 4. So I'm going to up it to 5, and I'm going to have it recut everything exactly like it just did, and it'll go a little bit deeper. And that is part of the adjusting process with the tool, and why you don't want to just rip off your project so fast that because once it's off, it's no longer, you have to restart over again. So I am careful to not peel everything up before doing like the testing I was doing, feeling if the cuts went all the way through. So I am going to redo all this with the blade set to 5. Alright, I went through, did number 5 for the depth of the blade, and I did a quick peek with the little spatula tool to see if everything comes up, and it all comes up good. So if I peel this up, then this is where the spatula tool comes in handy. You just get to slide along and pop off all of your cuts. Voila! Now I'm ready to make 11 more cards for my swap. I'm not sure, the other cards that I'm going to be making are die cut cards, so I don't believe I will need the brother for any of the other projects. What I used to do, or tend to do, is get a stamp set that doesn't have dies. I stamp a bunch of them up, cut them all like a whole sheet. If there's, say, 4 or 5 stamps, one that comes to mind is like Nature's Beauty. That's a good one that I pre-cut a whole bunch of samples, put them in my cheap envelopes and put them back in the case, and I did not color them, and I can color those as I need to. So that is a very good use for a tool like this. So if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, please leave them here on the video or over on my blog. I will have in the showcase the picture of the finished card that I am making a dozen of. Please like, share, and subscribe, and thanks for watching.